In our two previous lessons, what we've been doing is adding and subtracting positive and negative integers. So before we get stuck into what we are going to do today, I'll just try and jog your memory on what we did. So the first thing we did was that we started with a number, say positive 3, negative 10, whatever it is. This is our start number. And what we looked at is what happens when we add a positive integer to that. That's what we've been used to doing for a long time in mathematics, since year 1, year 2, whenever it's taught. So when we add a positive, what happens is that's just the same as standard addition, which is 5. Now the other thing we can do is, starting at positive 3, we can add a negative integer. Now you'll recall that the effect of adding a negative integer sends us in this direction on the number line. So this is the same as 3 take away 2, which is 1. Right, so the plus a negative changes to a negative here. We don't need to write the plus on the 2. Right, the third thing that can happen is that we subtract a positive. Again, we're used to that one. That's just standard subtraction. So that's 3 take away 2, that equals 1. So we're subtracting a positive number here. So when we subtract a positive, we simply replace all of that with a subtraction. The final one was the more unusual one. Starting at 3, what we were doing was subtracting a negative integer. And the unusual thing that happened here is that when we did this, it ended up moving us in this direction on the number line. So that's actually 3 plus 2. So subtract a negative changes to a plus. We add the numbers together and we get 5 as a result. So that's what we have been doing. Okay, so on to today now. And what we'll do today is multiply and divide positive and negative integers. So pause the video and pop this heading into your notebooks. Okay, so now that you've got that heading in your notebooks, what you'll do is just listen into the kind of theoretical examples. So you don't need to take any of these down, and then I'll give you some stuff for your notes in a bit. Right, so when we multiply numbers together, we can multiply positive by a positive, and that's just normal, what we've seen multiplication in the past. So we'll go positive 3 times positive 2. Now the way of thinking about that, when I was in primary school, I got taught that this was 3 groups of 2. And if you imagine 3 groups, okay, so here's group 1, group 2 and group 3, and what we were taught was put 2 strokes into each group. So that's 3 lots of 2. So this is 3 lots of positive 2. We can see here that this is 6. So what we're going to find, and this is what we've been used to in maths, is a positive number when multiplied by a positive number gives us a positive answer. We just don't need to write the positive 6 as an answer. Right, so here's an interesting variation on this problem. Let's go with positive 3 and multiply that by negative 2. So this is 3 lots of negative 2. So this will be the same idea, except in the diagram what I'm going to do is imagine 3 groups and put negative 2 in each group. Now the reason I'm putting negative 2 like this is I can't really put 2 negative strokes in there, so I'm going to list negative 2 as the amount in each of those. And when I add them together, just like I did here to get 6, I've got negative 2 and negative 2, which is negative 4, plus another negative 2 is negative 6. Excuse me. So we're going to conclude that a positive multiplied by a negative is a negative. Now one thing you notice with multiplication is 3 times 2 equals 6 and 2 times 3 equals 6. It has this property that it doesn't matter which order you do the multiplication in. So in fact, we could reorder this and do negative 2 times positive 3, and that will also equal negative 6. So the third conclusion we're going to make is a negative multiplied by positive is a negative. Alright, and the final example again is the kind of unusual one. 3, let's do negative 3 multiplied by negative 2. Alright, to do this one, what I'll do is use a method of explaining what happens, which is the complete the pattern method. Okay, so to do this, first of all, what I'm going to do is do 3 times negative 2. Now we've seen that already. That's 3 times negative 2. That's negative 6. Right, now what I'll do is 2 times negative 2. Now 2 lots of negative 2 will be negative 4, because a positive multiplied by a negative is a negative. 1 lot of negative 2 is negative 2. 0 lots of negative 2, well 0 times anything is just 0. Alright, let's do 1 times negative 1 rather, times negative 2. So you can see here we're going down by 1, 3, 2, 1, 0, negative 1. Now, if we can see the pattern here, we're going from negative 6, negative 4, negative 2, 0. This one has to be positive 2, which means that it looks to be the case that a negative times a negative is a positive. Let's keep going with the pattern. Negative 2 times negative 2. What we'll do is continue the pattern. That's positive 4. Negative 3 times negative 2, which is actually the problem that we're trying to work out the answer to, is going to be, again, we'll complete the pattern, positive 6. So this one here is positive 6. So the conclusion is, with multiplication, is that a negative times a negative is a positive. Alright, now what do we do about division, or what are the rules regarding division? And they're exactly the same as multiplication, because don't know whether you remember this from fractions, but when you divide by a fraction, so we've got 3 divided by, say, a half, that's the same as 3 multiplied by the reciprocal of this, or 3 times this flipped. Okay, so that's the same as 3 times, and a half flipped is 2 over 1 or 2, which is equal to 6. So every division problem can be turned into a multiplication problem, which means that the same rules that apply for multiplication apply for division and vice versa. Okay, so in conclusion, and this is for your notebooks, the rules are the same for multiplying and dividing. And so what you're going to write down is this here, which is a positive multiplied or divided by a positive equals a positive. A negative multiplied by or divided by a negative is a positive. A positive multiplied or divided by a negative is a negative. And a negative multiplied or divided by a positive is also a negative. So we can apply those rules to some examples. And let's do these examples here. Right, so the first one is negative 2 times 3. So this is a negative times a positive, which is a negative. 2 times 3 is 6. Alright, this is how many times does 6 go into 24, and it's a negative divided by a positive. So the answer is negative, and 6 goes into 24 4 times. This one here is a negative multiplied by a negative, so the answer is going to be a positive. You don't need to actually put the positive sign in, but you can if you want. And 3 times 9 is 27. Alright, here's an interesting example. We've got negative 1 times negative 2. So the laws of order up says that we have to do that first, and then we'll multiply the result by 3. So negative 1 times negative 2 is 2. Okay, a negative multiplied by a negative is a positive. So we've got positive 2 times 3, and a positive times a positive, well, that's just a positive. 2 3s are 6. Okay, here we have, and the formatting didn't work out properly on this one here, that's supposed to be a fraction sign there. So it's negative 32 over negative 8. Now you can turn those fraction signs back into a division sign simply by rewriting this as negative 32 divided by negative 8. Negative divided by a negative is a positive, and 8 goes into 32 4 times. Okay, same formatting issue here, that's supposed to be there. So that's negative 63 divided by positive 7. So another way of writing that is negative 63 divided by positive 7. A negative divided by a positive is a negative, and 7 goes into 63, 9 7s are 63, 9 times. Alright, getting near to the end of the examples. Negative 5 times negative 8. A negative times a negative is a positive. 5 8s are 40. Alright, here what we'll do is we'll write down negative 4 times negative 2 first. So a negative times a negative is a positive, and 2 4s are 8. So it's positive 8 times negative 10. Positive times a negative is a negative. 8 times 10 is 80. So the answer is negative 80. All right, this fraction sign again didn't come out properly in the document. So this is positive 36 over negative 3. So that's the same as 36 divided by negative 3. We've got a positive number divided by a negative number, it's negative, and 3 goes into 36 12 times. So there's 10 different variations on the problem. Now, interesting to note, you don't need to copy this down, but when more than two numbers are multiplied together with negatives. So negative 1 times negative 1, 1 and 1 is 1, negative times a negative is a positive, so that's positive 1. Here we've got a negative times a negative, which is a positive, multiplied by a negative, so this is going to be negative 1. There's an even number of ones being multiplied here, so 1 times 1, that's a negative, that's positive 1, times 1, which is negative 1, times another one, which is positive 1. And the pattern is going to be that when we've got an even number of negatives, the ants will be positive. And odd number will be negative. Alright, so this one here has got 5, so I know that the answer there is going to be negative 1, and this one's got 6, so I know that it's going to be positive 1. Okay, and the final thing I want you to be aware of, this is a really common mistake made by students all the way up to year 12. Squaring a number means to multiply the number by itself. For example, 5 squared is 5 times 5, which is equal to 25. When squaring a negative number, brackets need to be placed around the number and the sign to avoid confusion. So let's have a look at two different variations of this problem. The square of negative 3. So this negative 3 is being all squared. What that means that this is negative 3 times negative 3. So it's whatever's inside the bracket here multiplied by itself. This is negative times a negative, which is a positive. 3 times 3, which is positive 9, or just 9. Now this one here is the negative of 3 squared. So this and this are different. Now what this means is there's a negative sign out the front of the result of 3 being squared. So what we need to do here is do 3 times 3, which is 9. And then stick a negative sign out the front. And we've got that. So this one is for your notes, squaring numbers. That's important to get those examples in there. So pause the video now to make sure that you've got those in there. And then in the announcement, you'll see what the next thing to do will be.